Recently, for some reason, my school had always been surrounded by an atmosphere of darkness and death. Students in my school had constantly mysteriously been dying. At first, everyone thought they were just accidents, but over time, everyone felt more and more scared. The deaths continued, one after another, from week to week. But the real reason came from the murderous voting program on the students' cell phones. The teachers of the schools did not know of this strange horror story. However, every week there was a vote between two students in the school, regardless of their gender. Whoever had the most votes would then be killed by the curse. I had a beautiful girlfriend from my school named Mickey. She was gentle, innocent, and I always loved her. I always wanted to give Mickey everything on our romantic dates. But everything was constantly ruined by the presence of her best friend, Kiru. Like some sort of mysterious magic, whenever I dated Mickey, Kiru would appear. Even our movie night space was spoiled by her. No matter where we went to eat, she was there to annoy me. I never wanted to admit it to Mickey, but I hated Kiru. Our dates eventually became meaningless. I looked at Mickey with regret. Another date shattered again because of the graceless bitch Kiru. Mickey and Kiru had been best friends since childhood, so I couldn't complain about their intimacy. But what I feared most was making Mickey uncomfortable if I said I hated Kiru. I had even begun to wish that Kiru would completely disappear. One day, Kiru was called for the next voting poll in my school. I was happy, but to my complete shock and horror, Mickey had been named too. Mickey found out and burst into tears, feeling helpless. She was shaking, whispering goodbye to me as if she was already in pain. The next day, I met Mickey again in the forest near my school. Her face looked extremely pale, probably because of the lack of sleep. She showed me her cell phone. Mickey's votes far outweighed that of Kiru. Mickey was both miserable and frightened as she hugged me in tears, pleading for me to save her. I held a weak, small girl in my arms, reassuring her, I will protect her. That night, I laid sleepless in my bed, trying to come up with a way to save Mickey. After thinking for a while, I came up with a way to get the public focus on Kiru. I jumped out of bed and went to my computer. I took advantage of my Photoshop ability and cropped Kiru's face onto a sensitive photo. Then, I went to my school's student forum and posted the fake news, accusing Kiru of having an affair with a married man. Immediately, all the attention was directed towards Kiru with terrifying gossip. I couldn't believe the rumour spread so fast. And just like that, the voting results had a complete change. Kiru's vote finally surpassed Mickey's and she became the chosen one. Kiru's body fell from the rooftop into the schoolyard on the day of the announcement. Her body was broken from head to toe, terrifying all of the students. There was a sharp blade which Kiru's body had been sliced with. Blood spilled all over the schoolyard. Mickey had witnessed her best friend's horrific death and was frozen, speechless. That day, she couldn't speak a single word to me. I didn't know what to say to Mickey, especially when she found out that I was the culprit of the rumour which caused Kiru to die. I tried to explain to Mickey so she'd understand. I did it entirely for her, because I wanted to protect her. Surprisingly, Mickey decided to forgive me, and we agreed that we would never discuss this event again. Until one night, the most unexpected thing happened to us. Not only had I become the subject of the new poll, but so had Mickey. I was in utter shock and extremely bothered by this. I knew once Mickey found out about this, she would be broken. Our votes were extremely close, but I was still slightly ahead of Mickey. I couldn't bear to check the poll anymore. On one side was the girl that I loved, and on the other, my own life. I had no idea what to do. The next morning, I went to school. Everyone was staring at me, whispering. I immediately had a bad feeling. I rushed to the student forum, where I saw an anonymous article blaming me for Kira's death in order to protect Mickey. There were countless insults, scolding me for what I had done and calling for me to be the one that is killed. My whole school was restless that day, looking at me with eyes filled of hatred. This was the first time the coldness of death came so close to me. I ran to Mickey. The feeling in my heart was pain and depression, and selfishly, I wanted to protect myself. I had to find Mickey because she was the only one who knew everything I had done. It must have been her. I grabbed Mickey's hand tightly and dragged her out of the school to the nearby forest where we often hung out. I couldn't control myself. I used all my anger and pushed Mickey into a tree. I had never hated her so much. I yelled loudly at her. I had never ever acted this way with Mickey before. But Mickey did not deny what she had done. She calmly admitted posting on the forum everything I had done. She wanted me to die for her, not to protect her. I painfully faced reality. The girl who I had loved and protected did not love me the same way as I had thought. My hatred had now overcome my love. The person I saw was no longer the Mickey I had known. I rushed forward to attack Mickey, the cowardly girl that I used to know. My hatred had turned me into a murderer. I pressed her into the ground, both hands squeezing tightly around her neck. She tried to resist, but eventually she lay motionless, eyes gazing and mouth wide open. I checked. Mickey was dead. I calmly began to dig a deep hole for her. Once I had finished, I threw Mickey's body into the hole, burying her with my last remaining mix of love and hatred. My emotions began to run dry. I stared at the girl who used to be with me with cold eyes. I said goodbye and turned back for the school. I assumed after Mickey died, the vote would be called off and I would survive. Mickey's death had turned into a mysterious disappearance at my school. The students in the school quickly accused me of being the culprit. I couldn't stand up to all of the hatred. I stayed quiet and copped it all. After all, they were right. However, the vote hadn't ended as expected. The votes for me were increasing rapidly. On the day of the results announcement, I remained safe to my surprise. But later in the afternoon, before leaving school, the school suddenly caught fire. The students in my school panicked, screaming and running out of the school. I feared for the safety of my classmates, so I ran to each room to open the doors, giving them a chance to escape. The vote was no longer important to me at that time. All I cared about was changing the fate of my classmates for the better. I rushed groups of students outside to wait for the rescue team. The fire was getting bigger and bigger, but the rescue team still hadn't arrived. I became extremely worried. I watched as my school collapsed in flames. Another friend of mine told me someone was still trapped inside. Without thinking, I rushed back inside to find the girl. When I got there, I saw her struggling due to the fire and smoke. At that exact moment, the ceiling collapsed exactly where the girl stood. The girl stood frozen in fear. Like lightning, I swept her away just in time to save her life. However, a large chunk of wood fell straight down and struck me. I fainted, feeling an immense pain all over my body. Fortunately, rescuers arrived at the time and took me to the emergency room. My braveness was the story of every newspaper in the town. Thanks to my selflessness, my votes decreased in the last moments and Mickey's votes increased to 10,000. I had also needed to undergo major surgery due to the burns I had endured. Even though I had saved my life, my body would never be the same from the burns. But I was alive. In the end, everything went to plan.
In my village, there was a boy named Tony. He was an autistic child. He had a secret friend who was a straw man with a soul. The straw man with that soul lived hidden in the field next to the other inanimate straw dummies to avoid detection. Tony found his friend and the two had been close ever since. But as he got older, Tony changed more and more. He no longer dared to be alone with the straw man on the hill like when he was a child, because there were rumors that the effigy was evil. One day, Tony thought the straw man would harm and eat him, so he decided to break the straw man first. In that afternoon, he went up the hill and used fire to burn the straw man. In the blazing fire, he heard the angry straw man cursing him. Those curses and threats made a boy like Tony extremely frightened. He hurried and ran right away. As time passed, the story of the straw man in Tony's mind was only a memory. Tony was now an adult, an office worker. He had a family, a beautiful wife, and a naughty but lovable son. He lived a fulfilling life that everyone desired to be like him. Until one day, Tony's son came home from school, grabbed his sleeve, and happily boasted that he had found a very close friend. Tony gave him an affectionate smile, turning to ask about his new friend he had met. The boy also innocently told Tony that he met a big straw man in his bedroom and has been friends ever since. After hearing about the straw man, Tony's face suddenly changed color. For a long time he hadn't heard this name in quite a while. All memories suddenly appeared in him once again. But not only the beautiful images, but also the hateful words of the straw man in the fire made Tony's spine shiver. Tony slumped in his chair, clutching his head. In his heart at the time was fear and many other thoughts about the straw man. He was confused. His hand crumpled the half of the newspaper he was reading, making his son extremely surprised. Things took a turn for the worse when Tony's son said that the straw man suddenly appeared in the room. When Tony heard that, he could only keep silent, scared to the point of turning pale. He knew for sure that the straw man had returned, and the old words that the straw man told him would come true. That night, Tony took advantage of his son's sleep and sneaked into his room to check it out. He stood outside and opened the door to look in. And as Tony expected, his old friend, the straw man, came to visit his family, causing him to panic. Tony stood motionless on the ground, looking into the room. The straw man was still the same shape, unchanged, standing beside his son's bed. It seemed that it sensed that someone was looking at it from outside. It quickly glanced sideways to check it out. Its eyes were bloodshot, filled with hatred. Meeting the eyes of the straw man, Tony was so scared that he fell to the ground. This time he knew he couldn't hide anymore. Tony rushed downstairs in panic and fear. Tony clutched the cane in his hand, walking to his son's room step by step. He thought while the boy was sleeping all the animosity between him and the straw man would be resolved. He stood in front of the room door, taking a deep breath to muster up his courage before striking. But when he was sure of his decision, the happenings in the room made him surprised and a little hesitant. The straw man in the room did not harm Tony's son, but on the contrary, he was taking care of him and was very attentive to him. Looking at the straw man at that time was like a gentle friend taking care of his little best friend. So Tony decided not to take action anymore and let his son play with the straw man. But that day, things really started. Tony's innocent son, coming home from school, suddenly came to Tony and said that his friend said that the straw man was evil. Tony looked worriedly at his son again and feared he would do something foolish. So Tony asked, "So what do you want to do?" The boy pretended to think and then spoke with regret as he wanted to take the straw man to a faraway place and burn it. He also asked Tony for advice on this, assuming that the old stories of the past would make Tony think more carefully about his son's actions. But no, Tony fully supported it. The boy saw that his father agreed, so he was happy and ran to take a shower and then back to his room to rest. Meanwhile, inside Tony's mind was thinking something terrifying. There was a devilish and meaningful smile on his lips. The darkness suddenly spread throughout Tony. Last night, he stood outside witnessing all the actions of the straw man. A feeling of fear rose in his heart that the straw man would harm his son. So Tony decided to go in, have a frank talk with the straw man to understand what he wanted to do. As soon as the straw man saw Tony, his eyes were bloodshot and there was a fire of hatred. The straw man gave a ghastly smile, his familiar voice filled with fear. The fear in Tony's heart and the remorse for his actions made him no longer have the courage to hold the baseball bat. He knelt down on the ground in front of the straw man and burst into tears like a child, begging the straw man to spare his son's life. The straw man's voice sounded. His attitude was very honest, saying that he did not want to harm Tony's son, just that in his heart the straw man wanted a friend and wanted to be friends with Tony's son. But Tony never believed in the straw man. He looked up at the straw man with earnest eyes, begging the straw man not to kill his son. There was a moment of silence in the atmosphere. This time the straw man pointed at Tony and promised to spare his son's life, but in return he had to fulfill the condition that the straw man offered. For the safety of the child, Tony, of course, did not refuse. He nodded vigorously, listening to the words of the straw man. It wasn't until the straw man got Tony's consent that he said his agreement and had a monstrous smile on his shapeless face. After listening to the condition, Tony was terrified. But when he had time to look back, the straw man had spread his arms wide, rushing to hug Tony. This morning his son's friend came to his house as usual to go to school with his son. Tony knew the two of them were very close. So Tony decided to instigate the boy with a completely fabricated story. Tony told the boy that the straw man was a monster. It could talk and eat children's meat. That scared the boy to the point of turning pale. When the boy awkwardly asked how to solve it, Tony bluntly replied, "Burning it." As children usually listened to adults, believing Tony's words, considering the straw man a monster, they carried the straw man up the hill, deciding to set fire to it. The child pointed his finger at the straw man's face, scolded him badly even though he just wanted a friend. Tony's son, who knew the straw man was a monster, was very scared and worried, just crouched behind his friend. After that, the boy immediately threw fire at the straw man with a highly confident attitude. The straw man once again burned like the old days, but this time, no more threatening words. In the fire, the straw man looked at the children with hurt eyes, with both regret and acceptance. In the distance, Tony stood behind a tree and watched it all. He smiled and said, "The curse here was over." He enjoyed watching the flames consume the straw man in front of him, giving him a devilish smile. The real reason Tony wasn't heartbroken and scared when his son burned the straw man was that in the straw man was Tony, and in Tony was actually the straw man.
This is a monstrous story about a high-tech exercise rope produced by the organisation Z. Just keep jumping 50 times a day and you will lose weight quickly and soon get in shape. When Leo heard on the television that they were advertising this new product, he insisted that his parents buy it for him. "Parents, buy it for me. Do you want me to be teased by my friends forever?
He was even so angry that he said his parents wanted to see him get fat and die. However, Leo's mother turned away and said that the rope is extremely expensive. She could not afford it. Then, Leo crawled out on the floor and angrily said, "You have to buy it for me, otherwise I won't go to school anymore. I'll stay home and wait until I'm so fat that I die." The father who witnessed this scene sighed deeply. So he promised to buy it for him, as long as he promised that after losing the weight, he would study better. Leo was happy. His father was always the one who pampered him the most. After ordering online using the credit card and only waiting a few hours, Leo's package was sent to the front of the house, but when he stepped out, Leo could not see any delivery person. A few days later, rumors about Leo's miraculous weight loss spread throughout his school. After losing weight, Leo felt extremely confident every time he went to school. Everyone was surprised, and they were curious to know what secret Leo had in order to lose 20 kilograms in just 1 week. So, to the admiration of his classmates, Leo did not hide anything from them. He said that his parents had bought him a high-tech exercise rope where he only needed to skip 50 times a day to lose the weight. Hearing this, Leo's friends were curious to try it out. But Leo immediately refused. "No way! If you want to use it, buy it yourself." Leo felt extremely satisfied with this treasure of his. With it, he no longer had to go on a diet from now on. So, Leo ate freely, eating whatever he craved. Not only did he eat freely, but also very large bowls. Seeing that he ate so badly, Leo's mother advised him to eat less, otherwise he would get as fat as before. However, Leo angrily slammed his hand on the table and said that he was not afraid because he had the weight loss rope. Leo's parents looked at each other in a clueless manner. On their faces, a distinct sad expression. They had pampered Leo too much, and he had become spoiled. Through Leo's words, the rope was spread throughout the school. Now each student owned their own weight loss rope. That day, Leo and his best friend walked to school. The other boy turned to him and said, "The weight loss rope was very effective for fat people, because when losing weight, the excess fat will turn into fitness, helping them look healthier." However, Leo heard his friend's tone of displeasure when speaking, so he turned to his friend and asked, "Are you satisfied with your rope?" His friend said that if a normal person used this rope, he would only get thinner, but not be able to grow stronger. And yesterday, he stopped skipping because he was scared he would turn into skin and bone. Suddenly, the rope behind his friend's back moved. Leo looked completely amazed as he pointed at the rope and said it was moving. Hearing that, Leo's friend immediately turned to his back, startled with horror. The rope suddenly wrapped around his friend's neck, like it was being controlled by some magical dark power. Moments later, the rope suddenly fell to the ground. Leo's friend fell toward him, and Leo worriedly asked his friend what was wrong with him. However, when Leo pushed him away, his friend's body simply fell to the ground. Everyone who watched was frightened and shouted, "He's dead!" Leo collapsed to the ground. Leo's best friend had just died from that rope. Watching this scene, Leo was very confused, not understanding what had just happened. Only a week later, the whole school was flustered by the sudden deaths of many other students. The students who possessed this rope constantly had to use it. They had to skip with this rope every day, otherwise they would too also die by it. The school loudspeaker broadcasted an announcement. "Shh! Every day, all students must skip 50 times until we solve this case." However, more and more deaths occurred, because if they overused the rope, they would become so skinny that they died. But if they did not use the rope, the rope itself would strangle them to death. The students did not know what to do, and they all had to skip with the rope constantly. The number of deaths was so great that the press had to report that many students had strokes due to the hot weather. Now all schools were stunted, malnourished, and a series of deaths occurred, similar to some form of pandemic. Oddly, Leo was still calm, as if he was not bothered at all. Other students turned to him to blame him. Because of this jumping rope, it was all his fault. They saw that Leo was still slim without being affected by the rope, suspecting that Leo was hiding some secret. So, Leo hurriedly reassured everyone he had another way, which was simple. He said, "Just find someone to jump the rope instead of skipping it yourself." However, when the students heard Leo say that, they reacted violently. One of them angrily asked him, "Who will jump the rope? No one wants to die." However, Leo calmly said that their parents would help them, as all parents love their children. Now, Leo was unaffected by the rope because his parents used it together every day. Every day they skipped 50 times for Leo. Their bodies have become thin and lacking vitality.
This monstrous story happened to two close friends named Bon and Bin. One day, Bon was bored and told Bin that they were getting fatter these days. People would laugh at their bodies. He also expressed that lately he had also gained an enormous amount of weight due to his addiction to fried chicken. So he suggested that they should take some measures to lose this weight. Lose weight? Through exercise or diet? It's not going to do much if we are lazy, so don't worry about it, Bon said. However, Bin suddenly remembered something. He told his friend that recently there were miraculous weight loss pills, so there was no need to exercise or diet at all. Hearing that, Bon smiled happily. Losing weight without needing to diet would be great. He urged his friend to hurry over and take a look. They continued onto a small house in a deep alley near the football field. Outside of this address seemed to be a weight loss fitness centre, but the inside seemed to be completely deserted. Bon pushed open the door and called out to see if anyone was there, but no one answered him. Both boys felt extremely strange, wondering why this place was so deserted, and whether they went to the wrong address. Suddenly, a man appeared, startling them both. Bon asked the man nervously where he came from, and why neither of them had noticed him enter. The man wearing the mask said he was the manager there, then welcomed the two boys to the weight loss shadow class. After that, he pointed to 2 pills on the table and said that as soon as they took the medicine, they would begin to lose the weight. Within 3 days, the pills would be effective. Bin and Bon looked at each other in doubt. "How can we lose weight in just 3 days? Is this a scam?" they asked. They decided to ignore it and try the pills. Bon came home and took them on time, as the old man had asked. Miraculously, after 3 days, they had successfully lost the weight. But a freak arose. Bon's shadow suddenly became a mass of different objects. Furthermore, when touching it, it felt like real people. Bon quickly called his friend Bin to talk about the matter. Surprisingly, Bin also confirmed at this time that his shadow had a similar anomaly, which was monstrous by nature. They then decided to return to that weight loss class in order to ask them what was happening to them. "We'll meet there in 1 hour," they agreed. An hour later, Bon showed up on time, but Bin was yet to be seen. Perhaps he had gotten lost along the way. At that moment, the old manager of the centre was sitting in his chair, looking satisfied. Bon pushed open the door and proceeded to question him why their shadows had become so monstrous. The man said nothing and just smiled. Suddenly, Bin appeared behind him and said hello, spooking Bon. However, Bon looked at Bin's shadow and saw that it was still normal, so he asked in surprise if his shadow wasn't enlarged like before. Bin turned to the older man and said confusing words. "I find your method too slow, boss. I discovered a different way which is much better.
and then Bin sat down and touched Bond's shadow with his hand. "Dude, you must be impatient, right? I'll give you a hand." Bond expressed surprise at Bin's strange words. He wondered why he needed to touch his shadow. However, Bin approached to take the chair and said it was nothing. He smirked, saying that he just wanted to quickly free his friend. After that, Bin used that chair to hit Bond in the head, the blow so strong that Bond died immediately. Half an hour before this, Bin had been waiting for the red light to cross the street. He was afraid that the centre would close soon, so he rushed there. He thought he could just cross the street, but a car charged at an extremely fast speed and struck him. Bin was flung to his death immediately. However, after that, something horrifying happened. His shadow slowly stood up, accompanied by a scary laugh as if it had all been planned. The shadow straightened up and looked at Bin's body. Then slowly, the shadow began to change. It took the form of Bin and laughed monstrously. "Ha ha ha! I've been so bored chasing you all day, and now I'm finally free. Thank you for helping me figure out how to release shadows like me faster." After the shadow transformed into Bin, Bin's body also began to transform. It gradually faded and became a shadow itself. By this time, there was no longer the dead body of Bin. Bin had finally become its shadow. "Haha, now you are my shadow. Come on, let's go help my friend. He must be anxious to be released too."
Lie or Die game. David was an unemployed young man, but he had no intention of looking for work. David's primary income was based on the awards that he earned in games. David had a hobby of conquering challenging games. One day, David received an invitation to join an actual game. He curiously read carefully every line written in the invitation. "Congratulations on getting a ticket to our actual game. The winner would receive $100,000. There would be an invitation letter indicating when and where we would send it to you. We are very pleased to welcome you." David was amazed after reading the information. The game had extremely high rewards. According to the time on the invitation, David drove to the appointed place. He parked his car in front of a large building amidst a vast landscape of trees and mountains. David went with Anna, the girlfriend he had been dating for over 4 years since high school. David naturally didn't want Anna to participate in the game, but because they were riding together, he reluctantly let Anna stay in the car and went into the mansion. However, Anna begged to follow David inside. She promised only to watch David play. So the two of them held hands and entered the abandoned castle, eagerly awaiting the game ahead. But David suddenly shouted when he discovered that Anna had a secret hidden from him. David looked at the notice on the front board, which stated the game's rules. "Welcome to the Truth Castle to join in the game of lies. We invite you to take the electronic clock from inside the cabinet, carry it in hand, go into the castle and start the game. After entering the castle, the rule is simple. The participants are required to make sure that each of their words are a lie. Otherwise, they would die. 30 minutes later, if anyone could get out of the castle, he or she was the winner. Good luck." Below were the names of the participants, and coincidentally, it also had Anna's name. David and Anna, as instructed, went to get their watches and saw one missing in the cupboard. Apparently someone came first. While they were struggling to understand what was going on, another person appeared. He was a young man looking very rich. He introduced himself as Leo, who was also participating in the game. In David's heart, feeling insecure, he immediately told Anna to leave, but she refused. Not wanting to disappoint his girlfriend, David reluctantly allowed Anna to join him and got to know the guy he just met. The three quickly entered the courtyard, met the last player and a self-proclaimed organizer named Kenta. Kenta politely welcomed everyone. Before starting the game, everyone had to make a brief introduction. The first was the guy who arrived earliest. He looked like a young student. He excitedly called out to introduce himself. "Hi, I'm John." Next up was Anna. As she was about to introduce her name, David suddenly realized something. Not allowing Anna to introduce her name in time, David stopped Anna. Not in time to understand what was going on, screaming rang out beside them, scaring them both. The young man named John was suddenly poisoned and fell to his knees. As if realizing the problem, David quickly lied that his name was Anna, and Anna also understood the rules of the game. Both panicked. Anna cried and lied that her name was David. The man claiming to be the head of the organization turned to ask Leo what his name was. Leo expressed concern and lied that his name was John. After everyone finished their introductions, the organizer sternly said, "Another last thing I want to add. This game has only one winner, which also meant there was only one person who would get $100,000. Whoever told the truth in this castle would end up like that young man, dead." Afterwards, the organizer Kenta invited everyone to enter the castle. Before allowing anyone to express any concern, the organizer coldly said, "The game has officially begun." The door opened automatically. It was a dark and dirty space. Anna started to panic, but she didn't think the game would be so cruel. David did not know what to do, just being by her side to comfort her. Afraid that he would miss a lying word, he took Anna's hand and wrote on Anna's hand to signal that they would communicate by writing. David wanted to tell Anna that the game only had one winner, so they needed to kill the other participant, Leo. When Anna reflexively tried to speak, David quickly covered Anna's mouth and refused to let her speak. Leo had just appeared. David gestured to Leo with his hand. It seemed everyone was afraid that they would mistake words or tell the truth. Leo motioned for David to come with him into the room to explore. After the guy entered the room, David wrote to Anna a few sentences telling her to wait for him outside as he would handle Leo. After that, he went to a pile of wood chips scattered in the corner of the house, looking for the right weapon to hand out. Luckily, he found a knife still quite sharp, hidden under a pile of wood chips. He hid the knife behind his back and entered via the other room. The sound of his footsteps softened, mostly not wanting Leo to find out. But surprisingly, David was attacked by Leo from the dark corner with a kick from behind. After that, he fell to the ground and his mouth was covered by Leo's hands, unable to let him call Anna for help. But David was one step faster. All in his plan, David raised the knife and attacked the one who wanted to kill him. In the blink of an eye, David stabbed the tip of the knife at Leo's chest. At that time, David's coldness and cruelty was like red blood clinging to the tip of his knife. David coldly pushed Leo's body forward. Then he calmly pulled the bloody knife out of Leo's body. David sighed and said to Leo, Sorry. If I didn't kill you, it would be Anna and myself." Then David sadly turned and walked out. Anna was still standing in the same position, waiting for him as before. She saw his blood-stained body and quickly guessed what had happened inside. She suddenly changed her attitude towards him, told him in a voice full of sarcasm to commit suicide and let her win, which surprised David very much. Anna mercilessly told David that the real purpose she came here was to take home the $100,000 prize, and this contest would only have one winner. Anna also said that if David really loved her, Then he would kill himself so she could win. These hurtful words from Anna, like a sharp knife, cut deep into David's heart, which caused him both heartache and disappointment. However, Anna continued to holler David for being trash, only knowing games, having no career. For a brief moment, something terrifying happened. David grabbed the knife firmly and stabbed Anna. Anna was hurt and used the last moments of her life to look David in the eye one last time and called his name. And David, in his heart at this time, love turned into anger unexpectedly. Anna only knew money. He asked again if she ever loved him, but unlike what David thought, Anna gently said, "Of course." She loved him. Then she slightly lifted her sleeves to reveal her watch. She weakly told David, reminding him of the rules of the game he hadn't noticed, the game of lies. All the participants in the game, every word they said, were all lies, and none of them were real. David forgot about it, so without realizing it, the cynic words that Anna told him were actually lies. Anna intentionally said these things so that David would kill her with his own hands. As the last person to survive, it would be David. And her last words were true, that she did indeed, truly love him. At this point, the watch also worked. The poison quickly took Anna to death. Realizing the mistake, David held his head and shouted in anguish and despair. He cried out in disappointment, calling out Anna's name helplessly, but he wouldn't get a response. He was heartbroken, reaching out to lightly touch Anna's smiling, contented face, secretly wishing time could return. But in the end, David also made his final decision. He smiled in tears. David committed suicide. The surrounding scene sank into the original cold death. After David died, the self-proclaimed leader of the organization entered and looked at the devastating scene in front of him with cold eyes. He gently pushed his glasses upwards with a devilish smile. He said that the people participating in this game were stupid. He deceived them because he was just a participant like them. He came here first and lied in the first place. Then he took out his notebook and listed off the following participants and prepared a plan to clean up the place. He was confident that he was the king of this game, because human greed and impatience would keep him victorious.